the man, he's the myth, he's the legend, he's the scientist with all the answers and all the questions. It's time for another episode of Alex's Science Corner.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the slow clap. Thank you. You even killed the background sound, too.
I know. I just don't have it in me this morning.
That was a total psych out.
You notice I stopped, too, when you turned off, we just kind of timed that well.
Alex, what's going on in the wide world of science?
No, if you want me to go on, just say so.
Well, I'm anxious to hear about that psych study.
Well, let me do the asteroid first because that's first on my list here. So astronomers have found a new asteroid, and what's interesting about this asteroid is the planets and all of the parts of our solar system are moving counterclockwise around the sun in their orbits. This asteroid is going clockwise around the sun. So it's going in the opposite direction around our sun as everything else in our solar system is. And
how can it do that?
That's the part that is really interesting. So first off, it's in this weird angled orbit that part of it goes inside the orbit of Jupiter and the other part of it goes outside the orbit of Jupiter. And the two parts where it crosses near Jupiter, one part of the orbit pulls it farther away, and then the second part of the orbit, Jupiter pulls it closer in. So it's this weird orbit, but it's stable.
Is it ever actually near the planet when it's,
or
is it just in
close enough that it's partially affected by the gravity? But the way it's interacting with Jupiter, it keeps it stable in that orbit that it's in right now.
Okay.
And they suspect it's been there in this stable orbit for a very, very long time. Now, the original researchers who found it did a lot of different types of calculations and analyses to try and figure out ways that could go in. And one of the ways that they figure it could go in is that it might have been an asteroid that came from outside of our solar system and got captured and got pulled into this weird orbit. Now, a lot of other astronomers are sitting there going, you know what, there's still so many other ways it could have gotten deflected by planets and just tossed into this weird orbit from within the solar system. You can't say that this particular asteroid is an extrasolar asteroid that got captured. But whether it's an extrasolar asteroid or not, it is still really weird because of its orbit and really cool. So they're going to be studying that one for a while until they get more ideas about what could have caused it to go into that orbit.
And really, anything that they come up with is fantasy because they really is there ever going to be a way?
There's a whole bunch of, you can't call it fantasy. I mean, there's calculations and probabilities. When you're talking about probabilities, they're talking about out of a million test orbits that they've run in simulators to try and get it to go in, several hundred possible entries allowed it to go into this kind of orbit. There's other things that can also cause that. So it's a small probability, but you toss enough asteroids, something's going to eventually get into that orbit.
Okay.
So it's just one of those, it's a low probability that something like this happened, but we are seeing it, and there's a lot of asteroids in our solar system, and outside of our solar system too, for that matter. So next story, the one you're waiting for, is about the psychological study.
Because Brian and I are the only normal ones that would be in this.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Okay. You keep telling yourself that, Bobby. So this is professors replicated a well-known psychological experiment called the Marshmallow Test. And I know that you guys are not familiar with it, so let me brief you on the Marshmallow Test. Marshmallow Test was researchers several decades ago ran an experiment with small children where what he would do is he offered them a marshmallow, and if they ate it immediately, they could have the marshmallow. But he told them if they waited a while, they could have 3 marshmallows later on.
I've heard that done with Oreo cookies, actually.
Well, yeah, the first version of that was done with marshmallows, but yes, it's been done a few times after that. And so then after he did the experiment and saw the kids who would take the first marshmallow versus the kids that would wait, he did follow-on studies with those kids, and he followed them for like 20 years after that. And he found that the kids that delayed the gratification, that delayed taking the marshmallow to get the more marshmallows later, did much, much better in life than, they had higher paying jobs. They had
Yeah, this
higher
sounds
careers.
familiar. This study sounds familiar.
And then the kids that took the marshmallow immediately. This research, what they did is they upped the number of children they were studying and did a lot more evening out of things to make sure that they were dealing with stuff like the economics, the family life of the kids, so they can balance those things out, which the original researcher did not do.
So in other words, if a kid was coming from an economically disadvantaged...
They might have different, so it's like measuring kids from economically
might be hungry and want to
against each
eat
other.
it, right.
Well, it's more of a case of you want to put all the kids from that socioeconomic group together so that you're not mixing them in with another group so you can separate out those factors versus something else.
Got it.
Okay. So this newer study found that they're still seeing effect, but is not as strong an indicator as it had been initially. That was one thing. Now, one of the other things that they found was after the first study, a lot of people were saying, okay, one thing you do is then you teach kids how to delay gratification so that they will do better later on in life. Well, one of the things they've also found from this study is teaching kids to delay gratification doesn't change how they do in
Later
life.
on in life.
The effect is not as strong, but also there's not a lot that seems to be able to change that from changing their behavior that way to get the kids better off. So again, a big important follow-on study. The effect is not as strong as they thought it was, but it's also not as easy to train kids out of that effect.
Is there a shrink in the house?
Now, when was the original study done with the marshmallows?
I have to go back and check. I think it was in the 1960s.
Okay.
But it's
and
been
this
done
one
a
was
lot.
done. This one was
This
done
was
like in the past year.
recently. They've published a paper this year.
Okay, so it had to be.
Yeah,
within the past
it's
2
been
years.
around. One of the challenges, it's got to take a long time to do this because you've got to get the kids when they're young to run the initial set test, and you got to follow the kids for many years after that to see where the kids end up. Because, you're not going to know where the kid's going to be at age 10 if you did the experiment at age 5. You got to wait until they're in their 20s or even into their 30s.
Well, and
sometimes.
the other factor I'm wondering if they accounted for is with 20 years ago the technology was a lot different than it is today. So, yeah.
I don't know if that would be an effect from this type of study, but I know they are. One of the things that the initial study didn't do is get more information about the kids so that they can, again, isolate the different groups or isolate different variables from those different groups.
Yeah, control.
Control for different variables,
Right,
because
right.
the initial study did not have a lot of controls, so that's probably why it had a wider range or more pronounced effect that you saw.
Yeah, and your deviation is going to be
Yeah.
greater than it. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
All right. Anybody out there in Radio Land, if you have any questions about these stories or anything else, science or psychological related,
Science, talk to me. Psychological, talk to Bobby.
she is the whack job of the group.
Thank you. Oh, wait a minute. Now.
Brian, we don't say that out loud.
Oh, we're just playing with you, Bobby.
Okay.
I say that with love.
Yeah.
I'm the snarky one.
Yeah.
You're
I'm the wacky one.
You're the wacky one. Alex is the serious one.
I never thought I was the
Hey,
wacky
wait a
one.
minute.
Well, I agree with you. He is the serious one.
All right.
Yeah.
The number here is 203
837.
99.
24.